What I hope this video isn't is an old man ranting about the things other people should do to please him. I don't want it to be that, because I just turned 68, and I have been now for maybe a decade thinking more carefully about boats that I missed, forks in the road that I should have taken. What does a confirmation bias look like inside my own head? And maybe I've come to some partial conclusions, and maybe since I'm a man with children in their 30s and 40s and grandchildren in their teens and now one in their 20s, I have some things I've been thinking about. Gosh, what can I learn from these young people? And gosh, how in the world can I teach these young people some of the things that I wish I would have known earlier? So the first thing is, I've become afraid to jump off the tailgate of the truck, even though when I do, it really doesn't hurt. And I think what that illustrates is the fact that when we get old, we get afraid of risk. That when we see a problem, we veer away. We have forgotten that within every problem is an opportunity, because solving a problem, that can be profitable, it can be confidence building. And I forget, and maybe other old men forget, that just because we are losing our confidence physically doesn't mean we have to lose our confidence. How about this? How about if the characteristic of a young man who is hungry for risk and hungry to take a chance was sort of re-implanted in an old man's heart? And I started to look around for the chances I could take, for the chances where the upside-downside calculation made sense, and I could step out of a comfort zone and do something different. Maybe I'll try that. What if that extended to new relationships? I remember a father-in-law said, "Scott, you make friends in your 20s and that's it. It's way harder to make friends in your 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s. And I've thought about that and I've resisted it. But now that I'm crowding 70, if it wasn't for this channel, I probably wouldn't be making many new friends. So maybe as old men, we can adopt a young man's priority of getting to know the people that cross our paths. How energizing is that? There's little that could keep us youthful more consistently maybe than new people in our acquaintance. What if we extended that to thinking new thoughts about more than just the people that we invite in? Maybe we start with thinking new thoughts about the clothes we wear, but don't ask me to give up a black quarter zip and double front loggers when I go to work, right? Don't ask me to actually make a change. Well, that's an old man's problem, isn't it? Isn't it? So old men, what if we did this? What if we made a list of things that we have actually voluntarily changed in the last 6 months and set a goal to change some number of things in the next 6 months? Maybe we could do that, because young men do that all the time, don't they? Young men look for things to add, look for new chances to take. Now, you've heard me counsel young men walking onto a job wanting to accumulate knowledge to never say, when someone asks them if they know something, say, "Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know." Actually, let me rephrase that. To never, when something is often offered to you as a piece of new information, say, "I know, I know, I know," because that shuts off the flow of new information from that person. So old men, what if we stop thinking it in our minds? What if we stop shutting off our minds when a younger person or another person begins to recite something that we learned 40 years ago, and we listen patiently, and we engage, and we smile enthusiastically, and we say, "Thank you." Or we say, "I learned something like that, but not exact. What about that?" What if we open our minds to the idea that younger people have something to teach us? Because when we were younger, we probably were open to the idea that people around us had something to teach us. This is related to curiosity. Too many old men become old because they lose their curiosity. I go back to Benjamin Franklin's quote, that most people die around age 23 and don't have the courtesy to lay down and be buried until they are about 70. What if the prime characteristic of a youthful person is that they remain curious? Cy Swan has remained curious. I have a couple other friends who have remained curious, who don't just read or watch or have conversations to confirm what they already know, but read or watch or enter into conversations for the express purpose of learning something new. Maybe that would keep me younger. I was listening to a radio commentator a long time ago, and he was talking about the fact that we almost can't hear and do not mentally process the things that come in to that we hear, that come into our ears that we don't already think. If something is not congruent with our confirmation bias, it's as if we can't hear it. Well, that's kind of tragic, isn't it? So maybe, as old men who have lived longer and come to more conclusions, not only do we become hard of hearing, but we hear less, or at least listen less. I can think now of my wife pointing that out to me, bless her heart. So perhaps, if we are older, perhaps there's some sort of a default position that we could adopt to say, wait, I just heard something with the mechanism inside my ear, my hearing, that I did not allow to pass into the critical thinking mechanism inside my head. How do we do that? How do we bypass the shut-off of confirmation bias in order to be able to consider seriously something that maybe we haven't seriously considered before? So a lot of what I just said to old men is closely related to what I think I want to say to young men, in that it is getting a handle on pride. Pride, that I'm right, you're wrong. I'm big, you're small. I'm fast, you're slow. It's for me, and not the pride thing, right? The competitive, resentment-laden aspect of human nature. Getting a handle on pride, on figuring out the benefits of a sincerely humble worldview, is a cheat code to life. It's a cheat code to the bonus points that will take you to a place where, when you're my age, doggone it, life is sweet, instead of somehow having accidentally aborted all of your opportunities for joy because you, darn it, had to be right moment after moment after moment. So here's something that would also apply to the old and the young. The value of asking questions with the intention of listening to the answers. This is not just something for those of you who are relatively new on the planet. This is something that is the only way to really facilitate productive communication between humans, is being able and willing to ask each other questions. And then to some way communicate that you're asking this question because you have an interest and a willingness to consider acting on it. Young men, can you do that? Let me tell you this, if you can find an old man who's willing to do that, then that might be someone that you can trust with the questions that you ought to be asking, with the intention of listening and adopting at least part of it. And let me talk about trends, about the things that manifest in culture over time. Two sides to this coin. Old men, we have to stop rejecting out of hand, without serious consideration, the trends that come simply because they're trends. Because if we don't, we will miss some number of wonderful opportunities. And young people, you have to consider and try to find a way to not automatically buy into a trend simply because it came to you on your screen, or simply because so many of your friends are doing it or thinking it or saying it. Maybe here's something that's true for both ends of the generational continuum. It's a mistake to adopt something just because we hear a certain critical mass of people say it, or buy it, or do it. And it's equally foolish to reject something just because some critical mass of people do it, or say it, or buy it. Let's do our own considerations before we enlist in or ignore trends. So the wisdom from the past, even the distant past, and I'm thinking of Aesop's fables, there's wisdom in those. And the tortoise and the hare is teaching us that consistency beats intensity, right? That the right amount of unrelenting effort over the right amount of time is better than spectacular effort a few times. The consistent application of what you know about doing the things that you have figured out are important are the only way to get to where you want to be. A heroic effort is heroic. And yes, the Ernest Shackletons make one heroic effort. You got to read that book, by the way, Endurance, Ernest Shackleton. There's nothing like that. And so I'm not denigrating that. But in our ordinary lives, consistency beats intensity. And so dial back your intensity and dial up your consistency, which is easier for old men than young. So here is another one. That your reputation is more important than your wage. What you're becoming and how people recognize your name and what they associate with your name is way more important than whatever money you're making right now or not making. Now, the reason that cuts both ways is there are plenty of opportunities to make a lot more money and wreck your reputation. But the closer you get to the end of your days, the more you realize that your good name is the most important thing, synonymous with your health. A name that can be trusted is the biggest gift you can give to your future self that you can give. And old men, if your name is not right now, there's two sides to this. Old men can become so preoccupied with maintaining their image, that they damage their reputation with the people that are closest to them. They start looking out at their image to the larger world, and they neglect their reputation in their own household, in their own communities. So let's not do that. Let's not get so tempted to look beyond the mark that we lose track of the reputation that we have in our own families are the reputations that will actually allow us to die with a smile on our face. There are so many ways to magnify the lives of the people around us. And there are so many ways to come to a particular moment and think, if I had only. So maybe 5 minutes ago you went, okay, boomer, and clicked out. Or maybe you're tempted right now to say, okay, boomer, and click out. I've heard okay, boomer a few times, and it's perfectly okay, because we do have a tendency to be full of ourselves, don't we? And maybe not justifiably, but it's a mistake to discount wisdom anywhere you can find it, whether it comes from a young man or a young woman, or an old man or an old woman. Anyway, be wise, my son. Be wise, old man. What can I say more? Thanks for watching Essential Craftsman. Keep up the good work.